I'll never forget that moment. As I watched the ending credits roll, a wave of confusion washed over me. Why did I feel so empty? When I was 12 years old, I'd never been so hyped for a game as I was for Phantasy Star 2. Sure, Altered Beast and Ghouls and Ghosts were amazing, but this was the reason I wanted a Sega Genesis. So, what happened between the moment I pressed start for the first time and when the ending credits rolled? What led to this empty feeling? Was Phantasy Star 2 a bad game? Was my excitement level so high that I created impossible expectations that could never be reached? Or was it something else? A millennium has passed since Alice, Meow, Odin, and Noah freed the Algol galaxy from the clutches of the tyrannical King Lassic. Since then, the three planets have prospered under the watch of an advanced AI called Mother Brain. This supercomputer runs everything, and has been the catalyst for significant change, such as completely terraforming the once arid desert planet of Motavia into one now covered in grass, forests, and lakes. In the capital city of Paseo, a young government agent named Rolf has been having nightmares about a young girl fighting a giant demon. If you finish the first game, no doubt this scene probably looks familiar, doesn't it? After reporting to work at the control center at the center of town, the governor assigns Rolf with the dangerous task of finding out why the Biosystems Laboratory is pumping out all kinds of crazy monsters that are roaming the countryside. What the heck is going on? Is the Mother Brain malfunctioning? Returning home to prep for his mission, Rolf is confronted by Nay, a young girl whom he rescued off the streets 7 months earlier. An experimental mix of human cells and biomonsters, Nay has no recollection of any events prior to being rescued by Rolf. She begs him to take her on this mission, and thus begins our grand adventure. Right away, you could tell that this is going to be much different from the first game. That game started as a tale of revenge and followed that singular plot until just about the very end of the game. Part 2, on the other hand, starts small and becomes increasingly more epic over the course of several story arcs. Rolf and Nay will be joined on their adventure by 6 additional characters from various walks of life that show up at his doorstep. You can have up to 4 people in your party at once, and are free to swap them out at any point. Each have their own specialties and magic, but you're pretty safe picking your favorite and sticking with them throughout the entire adventure. Visually, the 1,000-year time skip between games gives the creators a lot of leeway in the way everything is designed. This was the entry in the series that really defined what the world of Phantasy Star looks like. Sure, it's all still a mix of fantasy and technology, but everything leans much heavier towards the latter. The way the characters are drawn, some tall and lanky, others with a bit of a cyberpunk, David Bowie look, gives everything a much heavier science fiction style. The music also evolves to feel more high energy and technology driven, and is possibly the most memorable and varied in the entire series. But, despite the increased hardware power and more refined look, you could argue that Phantasy Star 2 looks marginally worse overall than its predecessor. A lot of that has to do with a couple of particular things, which just so happen to be the biggest changes from the first game. I remember when screenshots started popping up in magazines, and I saw the first image of Rolf and company fighting some enemies. I thought it had to be a placeholder. Hey, it's cool we can finally see the characters physically fight, but what's the deal with the background? Or lack thereof? It's just a generic blue grid? It couldn't possibly look like this in the final game, right? Unfortunately, it was. I can only assume that this battle style was adopted because more than one enemy can now appear on screen during battle, and each are fully animated, even when they're idle. So, was the trade-off worth it? For me, no. It felt like it took away from the world significantly. No longer could we place ourselves on the ground level to see what the world looks like from the character's perspective. Okay, sure, so we lose that ground level point of view during battles. That's fine. At least we'll get to see it when we got to the dungeons, right? Can you imagine what these things are going to look like on 16-bit hardware? Well, it turns out that these were changed too. These new dungeons are large, elaborate, and complicated in a different way than the 3D mazes. Only the novelty of the first-person view is truly lacking, but the newfound freedom allowed for the designers to come up with much more interesting locales. In fact, despite the increased memory available, it's puzzling how small Phantasy Star 2 feels overall compared to the first. Phantasy Star had 3 huge planets to explore, and the adventure covered every inch of them. Surely here you'd be doing the same. I'll admit I was pretty disappointed when I didn't get to travel to another planet until more than halfway through the game. You were planet jumping within the first couple of hours in the last game, you know? I was doubly disappointed that the quest only takes you to 2 of the 3 planets. I suppose the larger cast helps make the world feel a bit fuller, but none of the characters that join Rolf on his quest give much of a backstory outside of what they tell you when they first arrive at Rolf's home. How much this has to do with the subpar English translation is the big question. However, Sega did release a set of Japanese-exclusive text adventures that fleshed out several characters' backstories leading up to the events of Phantasy Star 2. These are actually a pretty interesting part of the lore, and should be talked about. Here to tell you all about them is my fellow Phantasy Star series enthusiast, Greg Sewart from Generation 16.
Let's face it, Phantasy Star 2 is really the story of Rolf and Nay. The other 6 party members are so much fodder, filling general RPG roles like magic users, ranged fighters, and healers, unless you play the Phantasy Star text adventures. Suddenly, Rudo becomes a tragic figure on a mission to avenge his family and his village. Huey becomes a scholar bent on the destruction of biomonsters, and Shura becomes a spoiled rich kid who was so bored with her life of luxury that she turned to thieving just for the sheer thrill of it. You have to use your imagination though. While the presentation of the Phantasy Star text adventures is nice, including unique graphics for each character and all new music, you'll spend most of the time reading text and staring at the same character portraits. This is by design. The Phantasy Star text adventures were part of the Sega game Toshokan, tiny games users could download through the MegaNet service over the Mega Modem, which was released in Japan in November of 1990. That's right, Sega had downloadable episodic games available on their game console in 1990. Talk about ahead of their time. The Phantasy Star text adventures rely heavily on descriptions of lush landscapes and the bustling city life of Paseo, and the entire experience is menu-driven. You'll basically want to explore every nook and cranny, pick up every object, use everything on everything, and then do it all over again until you trigger the next event in the story. The Phantasy Star fan in me loves that these adventures exist, even more so that they've been translated into English. Generally, I just love knowing more about everyone's motivation. It's fascinating to see the backstory for all 8 characters.
16ビット6メガセガファンタシースター2目を見張るリアルキャラクターツインスクロールメガドライブ対応未体験ロールプレイングゲームファンタシースター2
Leading up to the release of Phantasy Star 2, I'd soak up every single detail I could find about it in magazines. Before the internet, this could be precious little info, especially when it came to an obscure genre like Japanese RPGs. I'd see a single blurry screenshot and my mind would run wild with possibilities. An adventure that was supposed to be so huge and complex, the Sega felt they needed to include a 110-page hint book, and this, my friends, is where my story goes horribly wrong. If you've seen the episode of My Life in Gaming where I talked about the first game, you know that a big part of what made it so special was the experience of figuring out the game and finding my way through it. You could say that it was just as much of an adventure outside of the game as it was inside of the game. Phantasy Star 2's included hint book covers every single dungeon and major event leading up to the second to last boss. It's all just there, practically begging you to read it the second you tore off the shrink wrap. And you know what? I was 12. I didn't know any better. I had no experience to draw from, and I read that thing cover to cover the first night I had the game, which effectively ruined any possibility there was of repeating the experience I had with the first Phantasy Star. There were no surprises in store for me at all. No figuring things out for myself, and none of the actual plot twists truly shocked me. And trust me, there's some damn good plot twists here. All the stuff was just me moving from point to point towards the final dungeon of the game. I probably had my nose in that hint book more than I was even playing the game. In retrospect, it's easy to see why they included the hint book. Phantasy Star 2 is an insanely difficult game. Progression is often obtuse, the dungeons are huge, and monsters can kill you in an instant, even if you spend a whole bunch of time grinding. And believe me, you will be spending a ton of time grinding. The final battle was hard won, and the climax was one of the most open-ended, yet satisfying I'd had the pleasure of experiencing. But the overall experience felt void of any real accomplishment. I was so excited to work through everything with my friends, but instead, I saw the last dungeon before I went to bed, on day 1, and I had no one to blame but myself. I was never gonna let something like that happen again. It's easy to see that Phantasy Star 2 is a really good game, with some fairly significant flaws. It's definitely one of the more popular entries in the series with fans because of its iconic look, brutal challenge, and amazing soundtrack. So, while Phantasy Star 2 is ultimately my least favorite game in the mainline series, it was a pivotal game for me in that it taught me early on that using a walkthrough every step of the way, especially when it comes to RPGs, could be a very, very bad thing, and that I shouldn't do it because it will most likely ruin the experience for me. But, you know, it might sound weird, but that's why I appreciate it so much today.